In just 9 minutes, uncover 10 explosive takeaways from Tucker Carlson's interview with Senator Ron Johnson, from why your dollar is collapsing and Congress is clueless, to fake spending cuts, vaccine injuries, and the truth behind endless wars. Takeaway 1. America is in a debt spiral. Senator Ron Johnson explains that the United States is spending far more than it earns in taxes, creating a growing and dangerous deficit. According to him, the federal government is spending over $7 trillion a year, but only bringing in about $5.1 trillion in revenue. That leaves a structural deficit of around $2 trillion each year. Over the next decade, if nothing changes, Johnson warns that we will add another $22 trillion to the national debt, pushing it from $37 trillion today to $59 trillion. He says this debt level is not just a number, it threatens the economic stability of the country. For example, if interest rates on the national debt increase by just 1%, that alone would add another $4 trillion to the deficit. Johnson makes it clear that these numbers are not being taken seriously in Congress. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 2, Congress does not understand the budget. Ron Johnson highlights the shocking ignorance of his fellow lawmakers when it comes to how money is spent. He says that most members of Congress have no idea how much the government even spends in a year. During a meeting, he asked his colleagues, "Does anyone know how much we spent last year?" and was met with complete silence. He later asked the Washington Press Corps the same question and got a wrong answer. Johnson claims that the real figure is over $6.3 trillion, yet no one discusses this. He adds that most spending is not even controlled by Congress anymore because it falls under automatic mandatory spending like Social Security and Medicare. For example, programs that should be reviewed every year are now on autopilot, with hundreds of billions being spent without any debate. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 3, fake savings in the beautiful bill. The so-called Big Beautiful Bill that Congress is promoting as a major spending cut is actually a gimmick, according to Senator Johnson. He explains that the bill claims to save $1.5 trillion over 10 years, but most of those savings are either fake or pushed far into the future. He says some of these savings include money that was never going to be spent anyway, like student loan forgiveness that the Supreme Court will likely block. Others are backloaded, meaning the cuts only happen many years later when a different Congress can just reverse them. Johnson says we are spending $29 trillion more over the next 10 years compared to 2019 levels, yet we are talking about only cutting $1.5 trillion. For example, he calls the claimed savings from not spending already dead programs a complete scam. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 4, a debt crisis is already here. Johnson believes the United States is already in a debt crisis, not in the future, but right now. He calls it a chronic crisis, where inflation has quietly destroyed the value of the dollar over time. A dollar held in 1998 is worth only 51 cents today. Even a dollar from 2019 has already lost 20% of its value. This kind of silent damage is already hurting everyone, especially those on fixed incomes. Johnson says that if the government keeps borrowing and printing money, people will eventually lose faith in the U.S. dollar. For example, if international buyers stop purchasing U.S. bonds, the government will have to either default or print more money, both of which would lead to chaos. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 5, defense spending is full of waste. Senator Johnson and Tucker Carlson both question why the United States is spending nearly $1 trillion a year on defense when there is no real threat of invasion. They point out that the U.S. has not won a war in over 80 years, yet the defense budget keeps growing. Johnson says we need to go back and evaluate every foreign war since Vietnam and ask what the objective was, how much it cost, and whether it succeeded. He believes the military-industrial complex, the network of defense contractors and Pentagon officials, has too much power and uses fear to protect its budget. We're halfway through the video. Thanks for sticking with us. If you're enjoying it, hit the thumbs up and share it in your WhatsApp groups. If you'd like to support us, please tap the thanks button below. It helps us keep making great content. Drop a comment and don't forget to hit subscribe for more. Now let's continue with the video. Takeaway 6, endless war helps the enemy. According to Johnson, many of America's foreign policy moves have backfired. He says the war in Ukraine has done the opposite of what U.S. leaders intended. Instead of weakening Russia, it has brought Russia closer to China, Iran, and North Korea. He also criticizes the endless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, saying they were based on bad intelligence and had no clear objective. For example, he recalls reading that Special Operations Forces had already completed the real mission in Afghanistan before conventional troops even arrived. Johnson warns that these mistakes have cost trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of lives, and yet the people responsible are never held accountable. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 7. Medical establishment hides the truth. Ron Johnson claims that the healthcare system in the U.S. is corrupt and controlled by pharmaceutical companies. He says that during the COVID pandemic, early treatment options like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were suppressed because they were cheap and not profitable. He believes the medical establishment wanted to protect the vaccine narrative at all costs. Johnson shares personal experiences, like how he got off statins and his health improved. He says many people suffer from chronic conditions because the system is not focused on curing illness, but managing it with expensive drugs. For example, he mentions a psychiatrist who said the industry does not want to find the root cause of chronic illness because it would destroy billion-dollar business models. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 8. COVID vaccine injuries are ignored. Senator Johnson is one of the few lawmakers openly discussing the people who were injured or died from the COVID vaccine. He says the government's own database, VAERS, has recorded over 38,000 deaths linked to the vaccine. He adds that about a quarter of these deaths happened on the same day as the shot or within a couple of days. Johnson argues that most of these reports are never investigated and victims are left without help or recognition. For example, he talks about a lawyer who had to go to court to force hospitals to give patients treatments like ivermectin, and in many cases, those patients survived when the hospitals had given up on them. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 9. Regulatory agencies are captured. Johnson says many U.S. regulatory bodies no longer serve the public, but instead serve the industries they are supposed to oversee. He believes pharmaceutical companies, food giants, and defense contractors have all learned how to manipulate the system by hiring lobbyists and capturing the agencies. This is why dangerous drugs are approved, useless treatments are promoted, and failed military strategies continue. For example, he says only 2 countries in the world allow pharmaceutical ads on television, the United States and New Zealand. Johnson argues that these ads are not meant to sell drugs to consumers, but to control the media, which depends on that ad revenue, and is therefore unwilling to criticize pharma. Now let's move to the last takeaway. Takeaway 10. Trump seen as rare hope for change. Ron Johnson expresses strong support for Donald Trump, saying he is the only political leader willing to challenge the deep state and take on the real problems. He praises Trump for doing things no other president would even try, like pushing back against bloated budgets and fighting media narratives. Johnson says this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to force meaningful change. He wants Trump to return to pre-pandemic spending levels and simplify the tax code. For example, he supports the idea of ending all special exemptions and creating a flat tax that everyone pays, including rich nonprofits like Harvard. Johnson says that unless something radical happens soon, the country may reach a point of no return. Here is a brief introduction about Ron Johnson. Senator Ron Johnson is a Republican U.S. Senator from Wisconsin who was first elected in 2010. Before entering politics, he worked as a businessman and accountant and is known for his outspoken views on government spending, COVID-19 policies, and institutional transparency. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, hit the thanks button below. It really helps us keep going. If you enjoyed this summary, please leave a like and share it in your WhatsApp groups. To join discussion about this video, drop a comment below. And for more videos like this, hit the subscribe button below.